Mic check 1 2.
How do I see you people commenting now? Oops. Bear with us, folks. Okay. Insights. Maybe we gotta click here. Nope. We have 7 current viewers, and I can't see any of the things that people may or may not be saying. Now they're live, and you can see your real-time insights. That's cool. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Hopefully you guys can hear us. Give us just a second here to get this figured out. Nope, I don't want to end the live video.
All right.
This is fun. Oh, hey, I've got... oh, here we go.
There it is.
Hey, comments.
What's
I know,
up, everybody?
thanks, Joe. I need an IT person. Can you... Okay, Aaron's got sound. Sorry, Hannah.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate your patience here.
Yeah, so we wanted to do a live show to talk about the Match Director Handbook. Just to go into more depth, if anyone had any specific questions or any topics that you wanted to talk about, we could do that now.
Rick says congrats.
Thanks, Rick. It was a fun match. Wish you were there.
You have to try to make it next year, Rick.
All right, Ruth. What do you want to do here? Answer some questions that you have gotten in the past to start there, and then go to the live chat.
Yeah, let's do that. So we have a couple of questions. I've actually got several that we've gotten from match directors, especially those who are trying to start up new clubs. The first one is whether we have any recommendations on the best way to approach a gun club in this person's local area on starting NRL 22 matches. So for that one, I'm going to have Justin comment on what it was like for setup for our club, because I wasn't involved in that piece of things. But my suggestion would be to get in front of board members and get in front of them soon and help them to understand what this shooting is, what the sport's about, and what they can expect from, participation to the types of shooting. Review the rules of the club and make sure that you can follow those rules for this type of shooting. There's a lot of clubs where, if you have to have a berm behind every single target, then you have to think about how you can accommodate that with the course of fire and things like that. So definitely get to know people on the board at the club, help them to understand what this style of shooting is, what it's about, what the positives are, and then kind of go from there. So
Exactly. That's what happened at Forest Lake. I believe Dave Gundry is actually who pioneered it, but he worked with Ron. Ron actually wanted to get this NRL 22 to the club because he knew what it was. So he knew if the range manager knows about the numbers, that can be expected, they should be excited about getting this to their club. So just inform the board, and then like Ruth said, if they have any rules, you're just going to have to go to the board and see if you can get exemptions. Like we had the all bullets must impact berm rule. We also had the rifle range had kind of a goofy setup where you're supposed to shoot from inside of the tubes for safety reasons, and then we got an exception to be out in front of the tubes. So yep, it's just working with the board and informing them about what to expect.
exactly. So another question that came up, who is the RO when you only have a small group, and can the MD and the RO compete? So we run into this all the time at our monthly matches for NRL 22. At our larger matches, we try to have assigned ROs just to make sure that everyone gets a consistent experience from stage to stage and that the rules and fairness are followed throughout. But yes, the MD and the ROs can compete in the monthly matches. ROs are rotating duty for each of the squads. So we break out into small group squads of, 5 to 6 people. One person is shooting, one person's on deck getting ready to shoot, and then there's someone spotting and there's someone running the timer and acting as that RO. So definitely, something that you can rotate in a smaller group. As match directors ourselves, because we design our own bonus stages, we give ourselves zeros. So we'll still participate and shoot the 5 predetermined stages that are published for everybody, and we'll submit our scores. But we also we will shoot our bonus stages for fun, but we give ourselves zeros so that we don't end up scoring high, because from that aspect, it doesn't seem fair to design a stage that maybe plays to your strengths over other people, and then, hey, I won my own match. So that's how we do it ourselves. So that's, one way that you can consider it. But we still, that way, if we can only get one monthly course of fire in, we only have to shoot that one, and we can still submit our scores for the month.
Yeah, I guess I've seen it, a handful of different ways. So one way is the match director, you could just shoot the match. If nobody cares, just do that. That way you get to have fun with everybody else. Another way is what Ruth said, maybe give yourself a 0 for a couple stages. Another way is to just put an asterisk by your name. That works better when you're doing paper scoring than practice score. Another way would be, where's I gonna go here? I guess that's all I got.
Yeah.
Brain fart.
Yep.
But
it's all
yeah,
good.
I mean,
I've been rambling, so
if you wanna shoot the match, you should just shoot it. I think we've asked a lot of people over the last couple of years, because I was kind of, wondering what people were thinking about me shooting, and I never had one person tell me that they didn't think it was fair. So as long as you're not giving yourself too much of an advantage, just shoot the match.
Yep, exactly. So another question, what about non-NRL 22 members? Can they compete? And the answer is yes. So for our club, we charge $20 per shooter. Young guns are free, but we charge $15 if you're an NRL 22 member, and that's our way of encouraging people to support the NRL 22. So this year, the cost of membership is only $60 for an adult. I think it's $20 or $25 for youth. So it's not a huge membership fee, and it just goes to support the organization that does a lot of work to try to support this sport. So our way of encouraging people to do that is to give them a $5 discount on their monthly fee for shooting a match. So yeah, any other opinions on that? But yeah, so if you're not an NRL 22 member, you just pay $20 is basically how we do that.
Yep. The more the merrier. So we don't want to, tell anybody not to come to our match. If anything, it's a good way to get people to sign up for the league and to shoot more matches.
Yep.
I've told people come to the match even if you just want to shoot one stage. If you just, I'm sure the match director would be happy to just let them come and shoot a stage just to kind of get their feet wet. I've seen other sports do that, like pistol sports, where they say come to a match, watch, and then we'll have you shoot one of the stages after everyone's done, something like that.
Yep, that's a good way to do it too. Hi, Greg.
What's up, buddy?
Shane, yes, we can relate. We've seen people struggle with their local clubs and rules as well. And I would just say, if you can't get close to your board members and you don't feel like you have a leg to stand on, either get involved. We have a couple of people who shoot with us regularly who are on the board of a local club and have worked hard to get to that point to start influencing. Otherwise, like you did, look for a different club. Sometimes it's just not worth it, like you said. Looks like Susie has a question for us. What other ways do you use to encourage others to join so you have enough members to submit scores? Good question, Susie. So one of the ways that we started out, we used to get like 12 people regularly for like the first 9 months or so at our club. We had about 10 to 12 people that would show up regularly. And one of the things we started doing was themed stages and themed matches. So stupid stuff that, we make people dress up, or if for those of you who've been to our matches, I'll get like heart-shaped beads for Valentine's Day and I'll make everyone wear them, or we do the Hawaiian leis for the tropical January match and things like that. Okay. I see what you're saying, Susie. So you have people showing up to your match, but not who are NRL 22 members. Tyler, I'm not even gonna justify that with a response. So yeah, I would say, Susie, for people who are new to the sport, like in your area. So Susie's in a different area of Minnesota, and they're just getting this off the ground. It's going to take a little while for people to be fully dedicated and really get into it. And once they are, then adding them to the community, having people watch the live show, that's huge, I think. Getting people, yeah, I'm with you, Erin. Getting people to understand that this sport is not just about showing up at your own club for the month and shooting. It's about a lot more than that. It's a much larger community, and there's a huge support group out here and group of people that are willing to help you and answer your questions, and kind of inviting people into that circle, I think, is the best way for that to go forward. But also, stupid themed stages, lots of fun at the monthly matches, and creating that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, just create a fun atmosphere. You'll get, like Ruth said, you'll get a following. You'll get people that are regulars at your matches. Gopher has small trophies now, which are pretty cool. DM Targets makes, we got one here. Let's see. Something like that, just for fun. You could do, little things like, have waters at your matches. Do a good job of publishing your scores right away. Just be consistent. If you're consistent and you have matches every month and they're on time and they're well run, people are just going to end up coming to your matches.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're trying to get newer people into the sport, then having, an introduction day, get some other match directors or some experienced shooters out to the range and do an introduction to this style of shooting, and go nice and slow, and don't use timers, and allow people to get their kind of toes dipped in the water a little bit too in a low pressure environment. I know I had I think 10 ladies showed up at a ladies only class I did a couple winters ago, and that was huge. So for ladies, they had been coming and showing up and watching a lot of these matches for several of them, and they didn't have the context or the understanding to know the language that was being spoken, and it can be overwhelming. So I just wanted to provide a class where here's the information, here's what a holdover means, here's what dope is, here's what the reticle looks like, and here's what you're trying to do. And that seemed to break down some of those barriers for those ladies, and we have some that are still competing regularly today. There's some that went to nationals last weekend, which was really cool for me. So I think having that type of option for shooters is huge too.
Yeah, as a match director, in a way, you're also competing. You're competing against other match directors. You're trying to get people to come to your match. So it's kind of interesting. But we're all working together as well, right? Because us competing against each other as match directors is growing the sport. It's providing innovation. You have to be innovative. You have to do things that are unique and new to try to attract people, and that just grows the sport. And you're giving the shooters, more matches, better matches. So that's kind of the advantage of the free market.
Right. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to have a lot of people playing in this space, because it's going to make us all better. And one of the reasons why we created the Match Director Handbook was to help other people get started and kind of help elevate and push things forward, and think about things that we had to learn over a long period of time, and get for feedback. Tyler, that's a good idea. Tee times for monthly matches. I think a lot of people struggle to spend, a full day at a monthly match, and tee times might be a good idea for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nice
Robert,
idea.
Robert, are you referring to a handout or guidebook about, introduction to precision shooting for newer shooters? We'll wait for the response.
Shane, there's a link to the handbook on the post.
I'll put it here too. If I can get it. Oh, there we go. Don't worry, I know how to do technology, guys. There you go. There you go. I'll put it in the description too later.
All right, have we answered all the live questions?
You're welcome, Susie. And that goes for anyone else too. If you guys are getting started with this, feel free to reach out anytime with questions. If we don't have the answers, we'll be happy to direct you to someone who can answer better. All right. So we do have a couple other questions. Good ones. So how do we make sure we run on time? Yep. How do we make sure we run on time? So this is a section of the how do we become better shooters and win an NRL 22 championship. Okay, Shane, we'll come back to that. I'll make Justin answer that one.
Justin didn't win, so I don't know if he'll be able to answer
it. Sorry.
So about the match duration, if you look in the handbook, let's see, what page is it where we talk about match duration? Page 7. So there's a formula in there you can use to calculate the length that the match will take in minutes. And it's basically the number of stages times the largest squad size times the amount of time it takes for one shooter to run one stage, which is the par time for that stage plus we call it the prep time. So the prep time is the only number that you have to guess. And at Nationals, we back calculated again this year, and the prep time at Nationals was about 1.9 minutes per stage. So what that means is it takes a shooter 1.9 minutes plus the 2 minutes of the stage, so that's 3.9 minutes on average to shoot a stage. So you simply just multiply that times the number of shooters times the number of stages, and that's how long the match will take. Some of our matches where we've kept on everybody and got things going real smoothly is about 1.5 minutes for prep time. And if you think things are going to go slow, it might be 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. So somewhere in there, you can kind of predict how long the match will take.
Yeah.
So using that formula, you can easily calculate, oh, wait, if we keep the squads to like 8 shooters per squad instead of 10, that knocks off like 20% of the match time. Or if we knock off 2 stages, or if we bring the par times from 2 minutes down to 1.5 minutes, you can just kind of calculate what that'll do for you.
Yep. So that's page 7, the match duration piece. Travel time between stages. So good question, Shane. It's going to depend on your range. So for us, our range is pretty linear. So there's one trek where you go all the way down the line and you got to come back around. So that one's going to take a little bit longer. But other than that, it's pretty standard. You shift over kind of one at a time. So if you have, for instance, I know that there was a match this year where you shoot all the stages in this section of the match and then you get trucked over to a different section of the match. Or I shot a match in Colorado at Grand Junction, and there were certain stages where they had people being driven between different pieces. We shot a match in Utah where you had to drive between stages. So if your range requires people to get in a vehicle, for example, you're going to want to add prep time to that. So ours was about 1.5 minutes with standard ROs at every single stage. Our ROs were trained to make sure that they had at least someone on deck and someone in the hole ready to go. And we had a pretty short lead time from stage to stage. So then see if you can predict the amount of time added to that to get from station to station, and then divide that by the number of shooters per squad. So if it takes you 10 minutes to go from stage 1 to stage 2, and there's 10 people in a squad, that's an extra 1 minute per person. Does that make sense?
Yep, and a lot of it'll just be, you just have a match and just see where you end up.
Right.
Use the formula to predict, and for next year, okay, what should I do to bring the time down if you want to?
Right. The most important piece is if you're dealing with times of year where you have limited sunlight, for example, you're going to want to make sure that you give yourself buffer time. So as long as you give yourself buffer time, then you'll get to know for your range, for your shooters, this is the approximate prep time that you need.
What we have found is that if people are going to complain about match duration, it's that it's too long.
Yes.
But then again, the longer matches do a better job of kind of, adjusting the standings to theoretically where they belong. So a longer match with more stages, you're going to kind of see those that belong at the top to kind of trickle to the top and vice versa. But, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone wants to have a good time. So if they're not having a good time because it's taking too long, you should probably make it go a little faster.
Right. Seth had a good question. What's a good balance between keeping experienced shooters challenged without turning off new shooters? So I think we should answer this from two separate angles. One is from like the monthly NRL 22 matches, and one is from, the bigger NRL 22X match type matches. So in terms of the monthly matches, this is something that we've discussed like ad nauseum about how to keep our experienced shooters engaged, because we have some very talented shooters in our area. And one of the things that we added that you'll see in option 2 this year is a stressor instead of extra length, because we can only shoot to 100 yards for most of our stages at our range. So we can't do the add the distance to challenge people. So instead, there's different ways to challenge them using additional stressors. And for our people, we're going to give people the option to, for example, shoot in 90 seconds instead of 120 seconds, or shoot the whole stage support side, for example. And then the regular, more newer shooters can shoot it with the regular condition. So they get a full 120 seconds and they shoot it strong side instead of support side, for example. So I think adding stressors in for more experienced shooters that don't actually change the layout of the stage is a really good way to challenge your experienced shooters, but keep things easier for your less experienced shooters. And that's for the monthly matches specifically. So and Susie, this kind of relates to yours too, for your option A versus option B. For us, we can't go the extra length. So the option Bs that have added length, we'll just go in and we'll add some stressors in, and it'll be in its own little separate box that says, instead of, shooting this in 120 seconds, shoot in 90 seconds, or after 5 rounds, do a mag retrieval or something like that. We'll just add little stressors in for people, and it's optional. So that's how we do that part. And then do you want to?
Yeah, so I guess kind of to answer your question, Seth, we talk about stage difficulty in our match or handbook. So page 15, stage difficulty. We define stage difficulty targets based on the winner's percentage of the impacts. So like at Nationals this year, Chris got about 85%, which is like a nice balance. That there's still, all the people in the mid pack are still getting a bunch of impacts, and the people at the top are still challenged. So it seems like a good way to go. If your winner is only 70% or less, it's too hard. And I mean, we've always heard that in those matches, that everyone feels defeated. And if the winner is over 90%, it's probably too easy. And that's where the NRL 22 monthly courses of fire is at. I mean, the winner is usually, they drop 2 impacts or something like that. So what is that out of 50 points? So that'd be like 96% or something like that. So that's the way that we look at it. We just look at the winner's score. Also, we go into why you should balance the difficulty. If it's too easy, it feels like it's kind of a little bit random, anyone has a shot at winning. And if it's too hard, not only is it not fun, but it also kind of begins to be a little bit more random, depending on what kind of hard it is.
Right. There's also, when we're designing our stages, either bonus stages or for our bigger matches, we'll mix in hard to hit targets that require a lot more precision with larger targets that people are more likely to get. And having that balance helps still separate the winner, but provide people a chance to impact steal, because that's what we're all there to do. And if your bulk of your group isn't having fun and they're not impacting steal, it's just, they're not going to want to come back. So that's how we kind of try to balance it too. We want to add in those separators, but also not make it impossible for newer people.
Yep.
Weather with the course of fire. Yes. So we addressed this a couple different ways, Shane, in the match book or in the handbook. Which sections are there's one of them. So one of them is the match layout section or stage layout section. And we talk about how if you're going to have wind dependent stages, for example, you have 3 or 4 stages that go out to farther distances than the rest of them. Page 19 answers that. Perfect. There you go. Well, there it is. But let's talk about it anyway, since we brought it up. One of the ways to combat that, this is actually Francis Cologne's the one who mentioned this to me at a match we were both at, where instead of going stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, maybe you go stage 1, stage 3, stage 2, stage 4. So that way you're alternating and getting people across the line a little bit further so that they get a chance to shoot those long range stages separated out. That way you don't end up with one half of people shooting in the morning where it's nice and calm, all the long range stages, and then in the afternoon they have all the short range stages. Meanwhile, this group shoots in the calm and the nice close stages, and then in the afternoon when it's crazy blistery windy, they're shooting all the long range stages. That way the scores will reflect more ability and less weather.
Yeah, Tyler made a good comment about using horizontal rectangles. So I think Tyler and Jason Anderson have talked about this, and I've talked with Jason about it. And Jason has this theory that maybe someday we'll put into practice. But the idea is that we still want wind. You know, wind is part of the game. You know, long range shooting is about wind. You know, once you get to our level, like it's about wind. And so to get rid of wind completely would be kind of missing out on one of the points. But when there's minute changes in wind that are not perceptible, then it almost kind of seems like luck based, right? Because you have 10 shooters, none of them see the wind change, but it only happens to 2 of the shooters and they lose points because of it. So there's this idea about somehow calculating, you know, what target width would be so that those imperceptible changes aren't affecting the scores. So that's somewhere that we might be going down in the future. But and then there's the target sizes. So we have on page 19, there's the target size recommendations. So these are minimum target sizes based on different values of wind, and these are pretty big targets. So I mean,
Which page is that one?
Page 19.
Page 19, there you go.
So yeah, these are really generous. We're not saying not ever to use small targets. We're just saying, I mean, kind of for the meat and potatoes of your match, you should probably stay around this and not go too much smaller.
Yeah. So and that's one thing too. We talk about this a lot in the matchbook. It's guidelines. It's not rules. The thing about this target size chart is these are targets when you're using other stressors, not target size as your stressor. So if you're using target size as a stressor, you're going to want to go a little bit smaller than the values in this chart, for example. So again, it's just a starting point for you. Don't read it as a rule. It's a place for you to start. Yes, that is exactly it. Thanks, Thomas. I'm feeling much better. I'm just a little sore, so forgive me for my wincing over here. Every time I cough, I make a sad noise. Justin's probably pretty sick of it at this point, but he's taking good care of me, so I'm doing much better.
Today was a good day. We went for a walk.
Yep.
And Ruth got a shower in.
I did. I got a shower. I was very excited. I was very excited to shower, so thank you for asking. Yes, I'm doing much better. Yep, Tyler. I feel like this is one of my less favorite things about the sport is the long range stages versus precision. I really like the positional stuff just like you. So for me, you know, being quick and having high round count stages is a good balance between that and, you know, having some long range stuff mixed in. I think to me, it's a balance of the two. So if you can create a balanced course of fire that includes some long range, some high round count barricade movement stuff, and some highly precise shots, I think that's the best way to do it. So you have the ability to separate out in any of those categories.
At the end of the day, you are creating a match for the shooters. So, I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at it. You can give them what they want because that's what our job is. And then you can also kind of lead them in the direction that you think that they're going to want in the future. You know, so one example is shooting offhand or sling stages. Most people aren't coming to these matches to shoot those stages. Like, people want to buy their guns and their scope and all their gear and show up to the match and use the gear and do well because of the gear. I mean, that's just kind of how we all start. No one wants to practice, you know, even though they should. So kind of balance all that out, you know, give them what they want, but at the same time, you know, try to give them what's best for them as well.
We try to make things fun for people. but also challenging. So last year at our X match, and also I wrote into the NRL 22 course of fire, I wrote the course of fire for March, and we had a stage where no rear bag was allowed. It was a bipod only stage, and that's something a lot of people don't do unless you have to. So my goal with that was just to show people, listen, you can get well supported using just your shoulder and not a rear bag. So, you know, mixing those things into your course of fire can be a good way to help push people and kind of educate them a little bit too. So gear restrictions are a fan favorite of mine. If you can do that and then, you know, trickle it in though. Again, balance. Good. What else do you guys have? We've got one other good one here. Talking about preparations, porta potties specifically, which I'm sure everyone's heard me talk about ad nauseum. Good, Greg. I'm glad you liked that one. I like that one too. That's a fun one. So porta potties are huge. Having enough toilet paper is huge. Having trash receptacles in your porta potties also huge. If you can make sure that you have them easily accessible too, so that you don't have to walk a huge long distance back and forth between bathrooms, that's also helpful. But I know smaller clubs, especially if you're talking about monthly matches, things like that, you're not going to be able to accommodate as much because these things cost money. But otherwise, you should be thinking about that kind of stuff. Another question was about food. We do occasional snacks for our monthly matches. During the winter, we did a lot of hot chocolate and coffee during those ones, but people pretty much bring their own food for the local monthly matches because they're shorter and you're closer to home. For our X matches and our bigger matches, we provide a snack pack in the shooter check-in bags. So there's like a stick of beef and a trail mix and some sort of nuts and or a granola bar, and then we serve food to the stages. So that's a pulled pork sandwich, a handful of chips, and some coleslaw, and then water. We always provide water at the matches, and that goes for both sets of matches. It's just something that, you know, humans require. So for us, we like to make sure that we were providing that. Yes, ladies need the potties. Yes, and Tyler, yes, the doors to the restrooms need to lock. That would be preferable. No one wants to see that. Please make sure that you have a locking capability.
Yeah, if you have a big match, if you have 100 people or 120 people, like, do not underestimate things like how fast the garbage cans are going to fill up after lunch, or when you're serving lunch, as soon as you start serving lunch to the first squad, like, everyone's going to want to eat right away. So basically, moral of the story is to have helpers to be doing things like that, keeping ice in coolers and keeping the coolers full of water.
Yep.
Don't think that that's going to be your job as a match director. It's just there's going to be too much going on. You need to have a helper doing that.
Yep.
So maybe you could have like a floating RO that can fill in, although that might not be consistent if they jump into spot impacts for someone to relieve them. But yeah, have floaters or multi-purpose people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had that issue last summer. It just got really hot all of a sudden, and the water just disappeared. We jumped in to help with lunch, and we came back out, and people were like, "I need water." And so it's a really good idea. These are easy things to get overseen and really important things too, because I think that drained a lot of people towards the end of the day of that match. So, Shane, yes, people are starting to be against anything that limits them using gear. Yep, everyone wants to use a tripod as rear support. So we go back and forth on this a lot, and I'm not anti-gear. I just prefer things really simple, because the more I have that I'm using at matches, the more over encumbered I feel, and if something goes wrong with it, I get overwhelmed really easily. So for my own shooting purposes, I like to be really simple. I oftentimes walk up with just a bag. I don't even use a bipod on a lot of stages that people use a bipod on. So for me, I'm like, the more you can do with less, the better off you are. And I still think that's true. But there's also something to be said for allowing people to approach things and solve problems in different ways. So I think having a balance, again, is important. So have stages where your gear is really limited, and have other stages where you allow whatever gear people want to use. Something that we try to design in is multiple positions, so that using a tripod, if you want to use one for rear support, go ahead, but it might hold you back, and that's a decision that you have to make then for yourself. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think gear is good, and that's part of this whole industry is driven by, the manufacturers with their gear. And if there's a stage that using a tripod will benefit you on, then we want people using that. So it's what Ruth said. It's a balance of everything. But yeah, if you have, just consider when you're designing your stages. If you design a stage where you don't intend them to use a tripod for rear support, you forget about that, and then they do, and it's way too easy. Those are just things you need to think about. Right. But yeah, we're not against tripods in the rear. We will, our X match, I'm sure people will be using them on some stages.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So how about instead of let people fail, Mark, we'll let people fail a little bit. Let people struggle. No one's going to fail. We're just going to let people struggle and get a little bit on the struggle bus and then talk about it. We've also talked about doing a class where, the day after our match, we'll leave the stages set up, and then we'll take a small group of people through and we'll talk through what our approach was with the design and what our thinking was behind it. So how we would approach it ourselves as shooters. And then, walk through it with people and give them feedback on their approach and talk about how to get some more impacts out of it. So, it'd be really fun to do something like that someday. It's really hard with schedules to make stuff like that work. But it's something that we're playing around with that I think would really help with discussions like this. So should I use this gear in this situation, or should I go with less gear in that situation? I think those things are really helpful to talk about in a training type atmosphere. So get really good with the gear you have. If you're going to run it, then know exactly when to run it and when not to run it. So let's see. So sponsors, yes. This is fun. Yeah, I know, Shane. So that's kind of my thought, Shane, is, there's people who want to get better and there's people who just want to keep doing the same thing. And I just don't worry about people who want to keep doing the same thing. I might make a gentle suggestion here and there, but if people aren't receptive to it, I kind of just brush it off and let them kind of keep doing their thing, and I'll keep taking home trophies, and they can kind of wonder why they're not taking them home, I guess, is how I do it. So, yep. That's pretty good. So as sponsors, we had another question about sponsors. Sponsors are really hard right now. We have several that we've been working with for 3 years or more, several that we work with from multiple aspects, both as match directors, shooters, monthly matches, big matches. It's really difficult out there right now. Like Justin said, it's almost like we're competing as match directors because we're all asking the same questions of our sponsors, and everyone just keeps asking for more. And it's really great that the sport's growing, but it does become challenging in some aspects. So one thing that you can do for sure is look at who are your local sponsors. So look in your backyard, what local gun shops are really going to benefit from supporting your match, or what are some smaller shops that maybe don't get as much attention that you can find who this exposure might actually really benefit. The other piece to look at is how you can partner with people in creative ways. So maybe they can't send you free stuff, but they can help, provide lunch for your shooters or something like that. If you're more flexible in how they can help you, there's different ways that people can try and help offset some of your costs, which is great. Or maybe they can offer you a at cost discount for some of the supplies that you need, things like that. Also make sure that you're following up with your sponsors, because we see this a lot and we hear it a lot from sponsors. They'll send stuff places and they'll never hear anything back, and that's pretty sad. So if they're going to go out of their way, they're responding to you, they're answering emails, they're thinking about what types of things your shooters might want, they're sending you free product, they're getting it in the mail and shipping it. That all costs money and time. The least we can do as match directors is thank them for that, or provide an avenue for our shooters to thank them. We try to provide a lot of return on investment by sending follow-up emails to our sponsors. They're each individualized. It takes a lot of time And I know that this job already doesn't pay anything, let alone pay well.
It takes
But
more time than any other aspect of putting on an X match is the prize table. If you try to get a big prize table where most of the shooters, if not all, get a prize, it's going to take more time than anything else.
yeah,
Another tip, Ruth kind of touched on it, but right now match directors are essentially like competing against each other to get prizes. So one thing you should look at doing is look for the brands or the companies that no one's looking at right now. Which brands are up and coming, or which brands are maybe brands that used to be popular and kind of have fallen out and they're trying to get back in. Like, look at those, because everyone's looking at the mainstream brands, and those people will be so happy that you want to work with them.
yeah, yeah. And we look for people too that might appeal to our shooters that aren't necessarily 22 precision rifle related too. So there's a lot of companies out there doing really cool things that are happy to help out, and they're not tapped out as much. So things to consider. Hey, Rick.
What's up, man?
All right, we had a question. Yes, Susie, we'd love to do a training camp at some point. What are a few things the shooting community can do to help support our match directors to lessen their load? Aw.
Thanks, JT.
JT, for those of you who don't know him, he's like our go-to guy. He lives up by the range where we put on our big matches, and he provides us an ATV to use. And
the ATV has a license plate on the back that says match director.
It's awesome. So we get to, when he shows up, he helps set up, he helps tear down his whole family shows up. They did all of the food for our night match. I mean, it was phenomenal. So great group of people. One thing that I can think of is Tyler wants us to put up our Audis now that we match direct. Yeah,
hang them up on the wall.
Yeah, put them up behind us maybe.
Retire.
Yep, there you go. We'll do that someday. But yeah, I think showing up to set up, volunteering to RO is huge. Getting really good range officers is difficult to do these days. So, volunteering your time to RO, show up the day before and help with setup, help test the course of fire, things like that are huge. Reaching out and just saying, hey, what do you need? That's helpful. But really it's time. It is what it is. And I know it's a hot commodity for everyone these days, but for us, like, we couldn't do it without the group of shooters that we have supporting us and the ROs that show up time and time again to our matches. I mean, between the two of us, we have more than a lot of match directors have in terms of support to get some of this stuff done, and we still couldn't do it without the community. So
no, Susie is stealing JT and Molly.
No,
look at us competing again.
Too funny. Good question though. Good question. What else do you guys have?
Yeah, so what are some ways you can attract good ROs? We've thought about this. Consider this idea. So let's say, in the X series you have open, you have ladies, young guns, those are classes, right? Well, let's say there was a class called range officer. So you could, at the beginning of the season, decide, I'm going to compete in the X series as a range officer this year. I'm going to range office or be an RO at 3 X matches. I'm going to shoot really good if they offer RO shoots. They don't, not all of them do right now. We do. They're starting to do that, but what we do, if you don't know, so we have all of our range officers shoot the match the day before the match. So it gives them an opportunity to get a score in, or to be competitive, or if they have never shot before, it gives them experience, and then it also lets us prove out the stages. So yeah, so you could shoot the series as an RO, you could get 3 scores as an RO, you could go to the finale as an RO and compete in their match. So that's just an idea we've had about how to attract good shooters to be ROs.
Yep. One of the things. We also do the prize table walk. We do a trophy for the top 3 places of ROs. This summer, we're going to have our ROs walk at the beginning. So we last year did first place each class, including the RO class, and then second place, and then third place, including the RO class. And then we would do the next place, and then a random shooter or RO, and then the next place, and then a random shooter or RO. This year, we're going to do a random shooter, a random RO, a random shooter, a random RO, or something like that, in between the places, which just makes sure that our ROs who are volunteering a lot of their time are getting to the prize table at the start of the match or at the start of the prize table walks. Our prize tables are pretty big. Everyone's going to go home with something this year. There's going to be like 140 people there, including the ROs. Everyone will take something decent home, but we want to make sure our ROs have that opportunity to build their gear up, to be rewarded for the time that they spend. And then this year, we're hoping to not go broke paying for a bunkhouse that we rented for the ROs for people who are coming up, so that they have a place to stay when they're up there, and that way they're not spending their own money on their housing. So we had a limited amount of space for that. We're trying that out this year. So whatever you can do to make it comfortable for ROs, provide them food, bring them snacks, take care of their basic needs. To us, that's what makes the match run. So that's what we want to do. Night matches.
Yeah, Shane's asking about if the MDH covers the night match setup. I don't think it does.
It does not.
So we should put a section in there on that. Basically, it's lights. It's what kind of lights we buy. It's how you use the lights. How you design your stages. The stages need to be a little bit more simple. They need to have a lot of berms. Otherwise, it's literally a shot in the dark. If you shoot at a target in a night match and you miss, you got nothing if there's not a berm behind it. So we like to put targets on berms, and we make sure that the light does not cast a shadow on the berm from the target. So the light should be off to the side where the shooter can see the target, and around the target is lit up berm. Just things like that to make it easier.
Yep. So maybe we'll add a section about setup for night matches. That was a really good learning opportunity. Hey, we did it finally, Francis. We published a guidebook like we talked about like 2 years ago or whenever that was. I guess it wasn't even quite a year ago, was it now?
About a year ago.
Yeah, okay. Almost a year ago.
August.
We got it done though. It's there. Awesome. So Rob asked real quick, he said, any suggestions on getting shooters to RO on monthly matches? So Rob, it's an expectation for us to have shooters RO at the monthly matches because we don't have enough people to have someone stationed there. So we go over in our safety brief, we read through what the stage commands are, and then we have our squad set up so that there's someone in each squad who's an experienced shooter and can help guide people through that process. So we set the expectation up early, and we do the same thing with our ROs that are at matches. So culture is something huge that can take care of a lot of issues for you if you set the right tone and culture at your matches through your safety brief, through your interactions with shooters, through addressing issues. A lot of this stuff starts to take care of itself because your shooting community adopts that culture that you're setting and adopts that tone, and they'll help to self-regulate and self-guide some of this stuff too.
Yeah. So to elaborate on what Ruth is saying, when you set the tone for your culture, everyone follows it. So some examples are, safety should be paramount. You want to be really strict on safety, but yet you don't want to be so strict that people feel like they're on edge. So it's a fine balance, but you want your ROs to prioritize safety in the rules and fairness, but at the same time promoting positive attitude and having a good time. If you can do that, that is just really fun. Everyone has a good time. Everyone wants structure and rigidity. So if you can keep that while still having a good time, then people have fun. We've all been to matches too where it almost feels like the ROs have almost too much power, and you're not really, you don't know what you can do. Like, hey, can I even go touch my gun, or am I going to get DQ'd? So that's not fun either. And I think sometimes that might just be the range officers are inexperienced and the match director gave them orders and they're just following the orders to a T. So it might have just been not quite enough communication and training. But yeah, try to, when you have your matches, try to meet that balance if you can.
Yeah. So yes, Susie, we do require shooters to rotate shooter order. But again, that's something that I haven't even thought about for so long because it's just a norm that we've established in our group of shooters. So for us, it's like if someone asked us, yes, you need to rotate through your shooters. But I've heard recently that come up. And keep in mind, especially with a newer club and newer group of shooters, there are things that might be the norm and might go assumed that haven't been set yet. Or there's people who are brand new to this. A lot of us are still new. I'm still new to this. So for us to move forward as a group and set standards, we have to communicate those standards out. So it's easy to just say, oh, you know what? We didn't realize that this was happening. So moving forward, this is the new rule that we're going to establish. You are going to rotate through the shooting order unless XYZ reason. So I think just setting those standards in advance is helpful. Most of the time people just get, I think, confused by that, or maybe they're inexperienced, or they're just not used to shooting big matches. We saw that even at Nationals last weekend. There was a squad where someone had gone first several times in a row, and we even had to bring up to one of the ROs. They said, we're just supposed to go by the order in our tablet, so this person's going to go first. And we had to explain, well, that person went first on our first stage. This is who's going first now, and we will follow the order, but here's the order we've been following, and that's the most fair thing to do. So if you're really nice and polite about it, you can, push back a little bit too, and feel free to just say, hey, do you mind if we call the match directors over just to make sure that we're all on the same page? You don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be argumentative. Just be nice about it, because these people, again, they're volunteering their time. It's really hard to get good ROs. It's even harder to find good and experienced ROs. So, try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
Do we require eye protection? No. So I haven't been to a match yet where eye protection was required. I don't know. What about you, Francis? You've shot a lot.
It was written into the rules a couple of years ago, and we did make everyone use them at one of our matches, but then no one else did at any other matches, and we were like, okay, well, if that's the norm, and we don't have target set inside of 25 yards, so the odds of something happening are less. But again, you have to follow your range rules too, so each range is a little bit different.
Yeah. Do you want a tip to be a better shooter? If it's windy, wear safety glasses because it'll protect your eyes. Yeah. Francis says never, but there are a few around the country. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where in general you don't have to. We've been told by higher up members of the organization that be careful, because if there's any photos of especially like young kids shooting without safety glasses, you might get beat up on social media. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of a gray area.
Yeah. So, yeah, good question, Tyler. And we saw this a couple times over the weekend too. As a shooter, I never assume that I'm going to get time from the RO. I always assume that I will not get it because for a couple of reasons. One, some of them won't give it to you. Two, they might not get to it in time to tell you what your time is left. So again, that goes back to, this is a brand new sport, especially in the 22 world. Again, experience level of ROs, things like that. We're just, the ability to sit and stare at a timer straight for 2 days, especially a 2-day match, I can't even imagine. So I don't assume I'm ever going to get it as a shooter. As a match director, we tell our ROs to feel free to provide it if people ask for it. They're not expected to provide it at any given times. We make a suggestion that people do 60 and 30 seconds because, again, our group of shooters. But as a shooter, I never assume that I'm going to get time. There are some matches, too, where they're directed not to give time even if asked. So, it's good to know as a shooter and ask in advance. I sometimes will walk up to a stage and I'll ask the RO, hey, will you give me time if I ask for it? It's good to know in advance.
Yeah, I would say as a match director, the goal is for the ROs to be consistent. So if they can't give time or they're not going to give time, they should probably tell people that. But I suppose if they don't tell people that, it'll just be an uncomfortable situation for people that are asking for time and they're not getting it. It freezes people up. It's better that they tell them, if they can, and they just need to be consistent. Mm-hmm. When I say it's better for them to tell them, it's better for them to tell them whether or not they're going to give them time, during the brief.
Yeah, Francis, or you could hear the wrong time, like 15 versus 50 seconds. I know. I always try to, if I'm giving someone time at a monthly match, I'm always like, I wait till 45 seconds. If they ask me, I'm like 49, because I'm like 50 and 15 are Yeah, it's good times. It's good stuff. So, yeah, good question about liability waivers. And Shane is kind of spot on with his response. So liability waiver only goes so far. But, you know, basically each individual is a little bit responsible for their own protection too, right? So it's good for us to set good safety standards and rules, but each individual has to know what their level of comfort is with personal protection when it comes to eye protection and ear protection. In my opinion, again, not a legal expert, my personal opinion. RO is telling the shooter how many shots they have shot remaining or wrong target, re-engage.
Yeah, kind of the match that we just shot, there were a couple instances where ROs kind of, thought the shooter was on the wrong target or something, and whether or not they were, I don't know. The RO just needs to be consistent with what they're going to do, and technically their job is to say impact. That's it. When the clock is running, they're not supposed to say wrong target. If they are, they should be consistent about it. There's the question about, in some instances where you have a specific target order, if the shooter is off order, does the RO tell them or just let them go blind? What we've done in the past is let the shooter, miss one and then tell them, or miss two and then tell them. But that sort of thing just needs to be kind of communicated to the shooters so that it's not kind of like, being, so that they're not like learning it on the clock, because it can just throw people for a loop.
Right. Yes. That may or may not have happened to one of us over the weekend.
Or two of us.
So, yeah, I think, like Justin said, it's consistency. Some stages are designed to confuse you, and that's what they're kind of testing, is your ability to follow a certain order. So as a match director, if I was really trying to test people on their ability to compute and problem solve on the clock and stay in order at the same time, I probably wouldn't want people to know from the range officer, since it's part of the game and what I'm trying to test you on. I wouldn't want the range officer to tell you, here, you're supposed to be on this target. But the biggest thing is, consistency, setting expectations in advance. So I cannot tell you what target you're on. It is important that you determine what target you're on at all times, and that you figure that out, and that I'm not going to tell you in advance. And when we go through our RO match, we have the day before our match to flush out all of our stages. We have the RO who's going to be sitting on that stage that next day running that stage for everybody else. So that gives them practice running through it in a low stakes environment with the other ROs. That way, hopefully a lot of these questions come up then, and they can be addressed before we start the actual match. Because once you start the match, if you don't give it to one person, you can't give it to anybody else. Or if you do give it to one person, you have to give it to everybody.
Yeah, I've never heard of a match that banned timers. So I know it sounds like it has been a topic for discussion, but it's a piece of gear that I've never heard of it being restricted.
Yep, I've never heard of it being restricted either. So maybe we'll do that for fun. No, I'm just kidding.
As shooters, we should, like what Ruth said, we should probably plan on not ever getting time from the RO.
Yep.
You'll be better off.
Right. So we have another question. Oh, let's see what Kent's got first. Yep.
Yep. The stage brief needs to be clear.
Yep. Setting expectations is huge.
It's kind of an interesting topic. So let's say there's an RO in a match. It's a big match, and the first squad comes up and the RO gives them some spiel about the stage, and let's say they don't do a good job of it. Technically, they need to do the exact same thing throughout the rest of the match. So I think consistency is extremely important, just to make sure that no one gets a competitive advantage.
I think I'm going to host a match where Greg's the only one that can't use his timer. Just kidding, Greg. Speaking of, if you haven't signed up for our match on June 25th yet, it's time to do that. There's only 5 spots left.
Yeah, so Ruth, how many prizes do you have for the prize table so far?
I currently have 103.5 prizes. Ask me how you have a half a prize. It's because I'm going to combine it with some other prizes, but we got more coming too. So that the prize table is going to be pretty stacked.
And we're
you
not
guys.
talking like a hat as a prize. We're talking like what it's worth, $30 or more or something like that.
Yep, something good. So I might throw a hat with the prize, but it's not the only prize. So yeah, it should be fun. I was nervous. I always hate when like 75% of people walk away with something and then 25% only get a hat because it makes me sad. So I work really hard to try and get enough stuff on the prize table. And luckily we have a lot of really great sponsors. So yeah, just get on an airplane, Greg. It's not that hard.
Thomas asks about which trophy is our favorite. Hey, Seth, are you still there? If you are,
Seth.
did you do the trophies for nationals this year? Because they're really sweet.
That's Justin's favorite. Of course, that's Justin's favorite.
So basically, I think this is Seth's, but he's got like, he does like a powder coat and then he does a laser etch to reveal the bare metal, and now he's doing like a clear coat over the whole thing. So if you want trophies, Seth does really good ones.
Yeah. DM targets, definitely. Hey, okay, you're gonna have to grab mine for me so the King Skull Medal one. So this one is just cool because it's different. It's not flat. I can't lift stuff yet still really well. So this was First Lady trophy from Eric Giel's X match a couple years ago. And it's sweet. It's got the little, logo in here, the X in here, and then it's got the King Skull. So that just looks kind of cool. And then my other favorite one is super heavy too. It's the most one.
Yeah.
This was from from actually the range that we shot at over the weekend at Nationals. That's way too heavy at Gadsden, but you can't see on here. It's got the snake, and it hangs like a target, which I think is super cool. So I like that one.
What about this one, Ruth?
Oh yes, this is the favorite trophy that I have. Justin has. It's his favorite trophy of mine. It's just huge. I was like, what am I going to do with this? I think I flew home from that match too, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this trophy. Yep. So, yep. The skull trophy is scary. Oh, Tyler. She thinks it's scary. That's cute. That's fun. So yeah, so that's that. Let's see. Someone wants to know what a few things someone can do to expand their reach and get more shooters interested in their matches. So we talked about some of those things already in terms of making it fun. Themed matches are great. Having an intro class for people who aren't familiar with the sport so that they can kind of get, their feet under them and get some exposure to the terminology used in advance. They can set some expectations. So that's huge. Another thing is getting out on social media. So I know I personally am not big on social media, but I'm out there all the time doing stuff because that's where our community is, and it's the easiest way for us to communicate with each other. So getting out on social media and getting in front of people and explaining to them what you're doing and what makes what you're doing different and how it might appeal to them, I think is huge. Having pictures afterwards is huge too. People love seeing like, wow, I look so cool, even though I got a 1 out of 10 on that stage. At least I looked good doing it. So I think that's huge too.
Yeah, if you can have a photographer at your match, just someone who's dedicated to go around and take pictures, it'll go a long way.
Mm-hmm. They don't have to be a professional. I run around with my smartphone at monthly matches, and I just try and get every group of people. I've given up trying to shoot monthly matches at our own range, so nice. I'll have to check those out, Shane. So another thing, how to map stages at a given venue to maximize your space. So exactly, Greg. I took some video last weekend too, and I told people, I was like, don't worry. I'm not gonna include the audio, so it'll look like you're just slaying every single target. Don't worry if you miss. It's good. So maximizing the space at your venue. I don't have any magical answers here. The biggest thing for maximizing your space at a venue, especially if you're limited, we're very limited at our monthly match location. There's these long berms. There's these shoot houses behind us, so we have to be in front of the berms. There's 50 yards, which means we lose 10 yards because we don't shoot out of the shoot house because there's no room for props. And then, so we're limited to like 38 yards in one bay and like 80 yards in the 100-yard bay. And then we have a 400-yard bay, but there's berms all along the way, so it's really narrow. You can really only get 3 stages in there. The best way to accommodate that is to get out there and set some stages up. There really isn't an easy button for it other than just going through and making sure that you're getting the experience at that particular venue. Get someone to go with you if you can. Have two people, that way you can see from the shooter's perspective and from your perspective setting up the different targets. You can look and see, is this going to work or is this not going to work? There's a lot of people who've done some really creative stuff with smaller venues, and I think that's helpful. There's another question about that, or similar to that, about using undersized targets for a smaller venue to compensate for relative difference in MOA. And I think this one's getting at, if you have a shorter area for the monthly course of fire, I'm guessing is where that is, because the chart is based on MOA size, so it's an angular size. So it does change with distance. And yes, we have lessened the size of the target to accommodate a shorter distance. For example, in our 100-yard bay, which we only get 85 yards from, if we have a 100-yard target, and we will bump that down in size so that we can put that in that middle bay at 85 yards and still make it an equal MOA. So I hope that answers that question.
To paint targets or not to paint targets?
We choose to paint targets for the RO shoot, and we do not paint targets after that.
Yeah, we want the target to be visible, but we don't want it to give anybody an advantage. So, the conventional way is to paint all the steel, and the thought is that, the first squad will get it, we'll get fresh paint, but they'll get that on all of their stages, and whoever shoots first, since they have the disadvantage of having to go first, at least they get fresh paint. It's still not fair. So we don't like to do fresh paint. We do the target markers instead. So, it's like a numbered placard where when you look out there, you see the placard and the target is nearby.
Yep. So that way, our goal, again, for our particular stages are not who can find the targets. That's not what we're trying to test. It's not to say that you can't test that or shouldn't test that or anything, but at our matches, that's not what we're testing. If there's a stage that we create someday where that's what we want to test, then we're not going to use target markers. But because that's not what we're testing, we're going to use markers. They're going to be clear for you to tell which targets in which location and which target you should engage when should be written out in the course book. So, again, it's just a different way to do it. And we choose not to paint the targets because we want to try and make it as fair across the playing field as possible. So. Well, I'm not going to change your mind, Shane, because I wouldn't argue with that either. So.
Yeah, numbered markers are nice. Mm-hmm. Just to talk more about what Ruth said, basically repeating her. If you want to do hidden targets, do hidden targets, but that should be intentional. Don't have a stage where you have 90 seconds and 10 positions and you got to stand on 1 foot. And, oh, by the way, the targets, you can't even find them. I mean, right. It's just too much stuff. So just kind of be aware. We talk about stressors in the handbook. We say, just be aware of how many stressors you're using at one time. We say 3 is a good number. So a stressor could be like a hard to find target, or it could be, a short par time.
Mm-hmm. Kent, that's a good idea. The colored skateboard cones. Our problem is we had a couple of shooters that were colorblind, so we realized really quickly we went with colored marker boards 2 years ago, and realized that was also not quite fair. So we switched to numbers for this year for that reason, to accommodate. We also try to accommodate lefties equally with righties, which is a whole nother thing. But we do try not to punish people because of their configuration. So if you're colorblind or short or tall or
more people are actually colorblind than left-handed. So if you're gonna accommodate for lefties, then accommodate for colorblind folk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good point, Shane, too. So if you don't have target markers marking where your targets are, that might actually extend your match duration too. So that's something to keep in mind as well. They're not easily labeled.
Good point.
Good call.
Yeah, nationals this year, there were a lot of targets that were hard to find, and he had numbered markers next to each one, and they were still hard to find.
They were hard to find. It was fun. It was a good course of fire, though. Super fun course of fire. Good.
Yeah, his target sizes were perfect.
Yep.
I'm thinking about going back and maybe looking at the target sizes he was using and maybe modifying that table. I don't know.
Yeah. So again, this is going to be a continuous thing. We're going to keep evolving it. We would love people's feedback. So, take a look at it. Give us your thoughts and ideas. We'll keep evolving. Yes, they do. All right. Anything else you guys have? Otherwise, we're going to sign off and I'm going to go take another nap. Well, thank you guys so much for logging in. Oh, no, we got one from Hannah. Okay. There's always that one person in class.
No, this is a good question. So it's about barricade or prop height. So we learned this at our X match last year. We had T-posts that were too tall for the short shooter. So that's where we came up with, like a 45-inch would be the maximum prop height.
Which we found out recently is actually too high still. So
it's right
42 inches.
Yeah, so a good way to do it would be to have multiple different T-posts, for example. And if you want people to stand or kneel, just tell them that. Say, you can use any T-post you want, but you have to stand, or you have to do 3 shots standing and 3 kneeling or whatever. That's one way around it. But yeah, don't expect some people to be on their tiptoes. Don't have a booster. Francis says 40 to 42 inches.
Yep.
That sounds about right. Don't have like booster blocks that the short people stand on. It's just not consistent. It's not fair. It can be dangerous. We've seen like where people are standing on a cinder block and it like tips over.
Then they to kneel and then they kneel on the side of the cinder block and they get a giant bruise on their shin and it's painful and they complain about it for years to come.
Yep. So max prop height, 42 inches.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, if you guys have any other questions or thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out.
See you guys. Thanks for the help.